It's my feel-good breakfast show.
It's a Monday morning. Welcome back to your feel-good breakfast show. We're taking you through some of the main topics that have gotten the nation talking, of course, with Roy Simpson, our news editor. He is back in the hot seat and ready to engage with us on what has been happening. And we encourage you to join in on the conversation by sending us your voice notes to 063 408 8863. And firstly, Roy.
Morning.
Morning. Are the lights on? Are the lights on? Eskom. It's always Eskom. Last week, CEO Andre de Ruyter suddenly left a month early, but not before making a range of accusations about corruption and government interference. And just as I received this as well, where you'll see part of the Sunday Times from yesterday, Public Enterprise Minister Pravin Gordhan says he's always had zero tolerance approach to corruption. We gave de Ruyter support against his critics.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. What are we saying? What's
he begs
going on?
to differ.
Yeah. You.
Yeah, they were dropping a match and sort of walking away from the flames very much. There's a lot going on there, but I think it's one of those sort of the straw that broke the camel's back things. I think there's been a lot of pressure on him for quite some time, but yeah, at the moment, of course, the latest news is that the ANC is saying, okay, you've got 7 days to deliver the evidence to the police, otherwise...
Of this corruption that you say has been
corruption,
government interference.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about R1 billion a month being stolen. That's substantial. So, I don't know, when I was a kid, I was always taught you don't dare someone to hit you. Yeah. So it's an interesting approach from
Especially
the ANC.
the guy holding the weapon, if you understand. Yeah. But then, what then is the motivation? Is this just outright political bullying? Are they trying to scare him out of the space? What's at stake here in this? Or is it just grabbing all the media headlines because it's just the timing? And what really, how do you see this playing out?
It's actually quite difficult to decode because I think there are a number of competing interests here. So you do, within the ANC, for example, have a genuine renewal movement. You have a group of people who want to clean out the organisation, who want to return it.
Into elections,
and of course, there are people who've been part of the patronage network and who have a vested interest in things staying the way they are. So who's playing which game isn't always clear. But we're in a situation now where there is a challenge to come out and produce the evidence. The claims have been made, and as citizens, we're not that surprised by the claims. So now the challenge has come out, produce the evidence. I'm not sure if the evidence can be produced. For instance, he talks about the cartels and the cars. Man, you just know that that's going to be really difficult.
And it's been there already. So what happens to him? Yeah.
So do you think it's a matter of difficulty and time constraint to produce the evidence, or the lack thereof?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, provability is going to be really, really difficult. Because
it's very difficult. I mean, could you hide R1 billion a month? Yeah.
Well, someone's been doing it for quite a while, so I think this is
goodness.
No, but so what's the repercussions then for de Ruyter if this doesn't pan out in that way?
Well, he'd potentially face legal consequences. I think overall, I'm afraid his key strategy, his best strategy at this stage is possibly to leave like a nice substantial affidavit and leave the country. Somehow leaving the country is in his future, in his near future. He said as much in that interview.
Kind of has to, yeah.
Because he has to, and he's also taking on cartels, and we know, he spoke, for example, that there are regular assassinations. That someone tried to kill him. So we're in that weird space where this individual, this prominent individual in our country's best move is to move.
To hide, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then, of course, are we going to talk about the other elephant in the room?
We kind of have to, and I don't know how important it is, but it is electricity.
Yeah. The Formula E that took place.
As sponsored by Eskom.
How does that even work?
Oh, it doesn't work well for me.
Yeah. How does that even make it onto that final document where you sign it off? Once again, I mean, last time we talked about timing, communication, those kinds of things.
Look, I mean, they seem very intent on being seen as a company, as a corporation that does normal corporate things. But marketing and advertising are normal corporate things in a competitive environment because you're trying to stand out.
Especially in the electricity space. It stands to reason,
you know. So look, the 254 billion that they've been allocated, that comes with strings that include no more new power generation projects. So they have to concentrate on distribution and building the grid. So that means that they're getting into a space where they no longer have a monopoly. And the ANC said they don't want a monopoly on electricity. For us, we also need to make sure that we don't head into a place where we've got just a couple of big corporations. Because Australia had such a bad experience with that recently. When Russia invaded and the energy prices went up, people found their electricity bills going up by 8 times.
Yeah, that's insane.
Because of the sort of unfettered free market that they have. So we need a hybrid system, and it should rationalize things like this. The idea of Eskom taking out newspaper adverts and sponsoring Formula E when they're so desperate for money, when they're in such deep trouble, that just doesn't sit well at all.
Especially when that money that they need doesn't yet exist.
Yeah, it hasn't materialized as yet.
Have we paid for a sponsorship that we can't even afford yet?
Yes.
I want to see my face on that car. Thank you very much. I will take that.
Don't you want to drive it around?
Yeah, if this has triggered you in any way, we'd love to hear from you. 063 408 8863. If you want to chat about any of the news making headlines in your world, let us know. We'll continue the chat with Roy in just a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Why are we sitting down with the best this morning? Well, there is always something going on in Mzansi and no shortage of important things to chat about, and we've had some gristle to chew on this morning. We are back with news editor Roy Simpson to talk about the news headlines, and of course we encourage you at home to get stuck in. Join the discussion by sending us a voice note on 063 408 8863. Roy, thanks for sticking around.
Absolutely, and a very important point of conversation to start off with right now. The fact that we might be looking at an entirely new system at play, because at the end of the week, Parliament passed the Electoral Amendment Bill, which, among other things, allows independent candidates to stand in next year's elections.
Come on, buddy.
This is a huge, huge thing. Roy, how important is this right now?
Really, really important. It should be a fundamental ground shift in the whole nature of our democracy. Up until this point, we must remember the system we have was a product of a negotiated settlement at the end of a civil war. And the proportional representation system looked like the best way to ensure mostly racial representation. But we've moved way beyond that.
It's kind of an oversimplification.
It was. And we've moved so far past that now. And we can now see the flaws in the system, which is that it's entirely designed for political parties, so that the party becomes your first loyalty. I mean, we've even heard that from the sitting state president, that his loyalty to the party supersedes his loyalty to the people.
It's like a wartime kind of mentality that you know, the collective ahead of the individual. Yeah?
Absolutely, because every single election then becomes a war to make sure that you stay in power. And that's problematic for us. So the idea that individuals can stand is fantastic. And the Constitutional Court, when the case was originally brought, went, that's exactly what the country needs. And I think the people who brought the case to the Constitutional Court assumed that the outcome had to be a constituency system, where we would vote for someone, we would know who represents us in a particular area.
Right.
So I don't know, Santon and places would have a person that they voted for who's responsible to them and that they can hold responsible. And that was the vision. But what we've landed up with is a situation where the people who need to make the law are the people who are most impacted negatively by the law. It's the political parties that sit in Parliament. So what they've done is they've done everything they can to hamstring the independent candidates and to make it as difficult for them as possible to get into Parliament.
So should that not be an extra red flag, if you will, to the nation of the call to stand up for freedom and to say, well, maybe there is something. There's something here.
Well, the way to do that, in practical terms, is to change things at the polls. In theory, we go to elections next year. And the thing is that those elections are now also have a question mark over them, because you've got people like Musi Maimane, who would certainly stand as an independent candidate. Yeah. He's outrightly said this is his way back into Parliament. But he and others like him can see the flaws, they can see what the problem is. So an independent candidate, for example, will need almost twice as many votes to get a seat in Parliament as a political party will. Also, if you got 1 million votes as an independent candidate, you'd still only get one seat. All your other votes would get put in a pool and divided up among the political parties.
Everyone
So how does that work? Is that just part of the new bill that was passed, and what's the rationale behind that?
I don't know if there is a rationale. They're trying to spin it as the fairest way to ensure equity for voters. But people like Musi, the Independent Candidates Association, organizations like that, they're saying very clearly it absolutely isn't. It undermines democracy. So they will head to the Constitutional Court. I would say Cyril Ramaphosa needs to sign this today or tomorrow to meet the Constitutional Court deadline. So he needs to sign it into law. I'd say by lunchtime Wednesday, the first court papers will be filed. And by the weekend, we'll have multiple court cases.
Which is terrifying because we've got these, you know, you speak about Musi, you speak about Zaki Ahmed, these incredible figures that could drive change, but if they're going to spend the next 5 months in court and not politicking, it kind of defuses this wonderful moment in what could be a turning point in our country's history. We're going to keep chatting with this man. He ain't going nowhere. We're going to take a wider gaze and take a look at what's happening on the continent and further abroad. Stick around if you want to drop any voice notes this morning. Gee whiz, I can't believe we haven't had like 100. 063 408 8863. What's on your mind?
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
It's a Monday morning. Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show. And it's time yet again that we set our sights on the headlines with Roy Simpson. We've been discussing some very, very interesting topics. And we move on now, as Graham said earlier, on continentally to focus on what is happening. And we'd love to hear your opinion on everything that we discuss. Send us your voice notes to 063 408 8863. Of course, Nigeria. Of course, in the throes of election fever, over 90 million registered voters that have now voted for a new president. This happened on Saturday. Do we know who it will be right now? This is the continent's most populous nation.
We're nowhere close to knowing who it's going to be.
It takes a while to count that many votes.
Yeah,
I was
90 million people,
but that's a turnout.
177,000 voting districts. I mean, look, it is technologically possible to do these things at speed, but this is on-the-ground reality. They're only just shifting to a biometric voter system, and there have been flaws with that. It's a country that's been noted for violence around elections. This one hasn't been that bad, but there's still been some. So, in fact, there's some voting stations that are only going to open today. So it's taking a little while.
Goodness.
This is not unheard of. India takes absolute ages to run their election. Man, we're probably looking towards the end of the week, around about Thursday, Friday, before we get a measure. The interesting thing is that this time we've got 3 candidates. So since '99, there have been 2 parties that have completely dominated. Just they've swapped places, and 95% of Parliament has been their parties. Now you've got the emergence of a third-party candidate, a Labour candidate. So the ruling party's guy is Bola Tinubu, and the opposition candidate is Atiku Abubakar. But now you've got this guy who's emerged, who has the youth behind him, and his name is Peter Obi. So it's a whole different flavor to him. And he's excited the youth, and the youth are a massive proportion of the voters.
And we saw that during unrest in Nigeria during portions, I mean, throughout the last 3 years, it feels like there has been mobilization. It feels like young voters in Nigeria, certainly from the news that we saw, are ready to put their hands up. Is this that time? Are you going to see things playing out slightly differently with this election? Great to see a hand being put up. Is that going to lead to a change in politics, or do you see this playing out as they have?
No, I think the chances of a change here are really, really good. Muhammadu Buhari's reached the end of his tenure, and, you know, there is going to be a change of government. He's got his term limit, which is great. But he didn't really achieve anything he set out to achieve in terms of security. I mean, you keep hearing stories of people being abducted and things like that. So the average young Nigerian has major economic problems. Inflation's 25%. And they've got security problems. So they want change in a very real, very visceral way. I'd say the opportunity for someone new is very, very strong.
Yeah.
But we'll probably go to a runoff election then. Because the formula for winning is quite complex. You've got to get the most votes, and you've also got to get more than a quarter of the votes in more than 3/4 of the states.
Okay.
Right.
So if that formula isn't met by one individual, then the top 2 go into a runoff within 3 weeks. I think that's our most likely outcome.
Okay.
Politics, eh? Politics. And of course, in other news as well, it would appear that China is putting their hands up, proposing a peace plan for Russia and Ukraine. And I guess the big question is China even the right country to be stepping in as a mediator? How would Russia even feel about that? You know, a superpower telling another superpower what to do in this
or offering them a back door, yeah.
Well, they do have a special relationship. I mean, Xi Jinping is saying that there is no limit to their relationship. We know, for example, that one of the reasons the Russian economy is still kind of stable is that China is one of the main purchasers of its energy that it can't sell to the West. So China's financially keeping it afloat. They've got much bigger ambitions together. They're also members of BRICS together, along with us. So there's a lot going on between the two of them, which makes China an option. Because no NATO country, no one in the West, has any credibility. They've been providing arms to Ukraine. So the key is, as long as China doesn't start providing arms to Russia, then I think it is in with a shot of being an honest broker and being able to do something here, that's kind of exciting. There is a prospect on the horizon.
Right, absolutely is.
And is the timing right for that? Do you see a point where Russia will step back? Is there a line in the sand, knowing Putin? Does he operate in that way? Is there an end game in sight, or is this a credible option to see a shift?
I don't know. I don't know from a Putin point of view what the out is, because I think what he went into this hoping to achieve just isn't on the table anymore.
Far gone now.
Yeah, so that's not an option. So how he climbs down while still claiming a victory, really, I can't see that formula working. I also suspect that China's in this purely for its own motives.
Yeah.
Because one of the things they're preaching is territorial integrity. So I wonder if they don't have an eye on Taiwan. Correct.
Wow.
And whether that isn't the trade-off. So let's at least just take the idea that there is a major superpower that can be a broker right now.
And take a little hope.
And let's hope that is a path to peace, because I mean, there's a war going on. It's horrible. People
Hundreds
are dying.
of thousands of young men are dying every
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. Absolutely awful.
Well, do continue to let us know on this Monday morning what you think about these headlines and the many more that make their way onto your desk on this Monday morning. 063-408-8863. I guess the big positive to draw from this, as we like to at the end of all of our discussions, the introduction of a possible new independent candidate
We'll see.
into the South African political sphere.